Hello, everyone. Welcome into the North Georgia Sports Report podcast. Will Cooper and Art Mosley bringing it to you here on a Wednesday, November the 8th. Hope you are all doing well. It is playoff time in Cherokee County. Art, you know what that means. It means it's time for some big games and some big conversations. Looking forward to having those with you. How are you doing, my friend?
Coop, I am doing well, man. Unseasonal temperatures here as we're in the low 80s here for the next couple of days, but that doesn't change the scenario for us. We've got 3 teams in the playoffs this week. It's an exciting time. We've talked about this before. Basketball getting kicked off for the regular season starting on Saturday. The GHSA allows teams to play, but before we get to basketball, man, we've still got the first round, as we mentioned, the playoffs, and man, I'm excited.
I'm excited, too. We've got 3 of our Cherokee County teams in. We will be going over all of those playoff matchups, and we'll also be touching briefly on the games from last week, but this is more of a show for the fans of the Sequoyah Chiefs, Creekview Grizzlies, and River Ridge Knights, and we'll break down those matchups individually, and we'll also talk about some other news. And then at the end, if you'd like to stick around, Art and I have put together a couple of brackets we would like to go over with the folks, so if you'd like to play along at home, it's that time. You can go to ghsa.net and print off your bracket and play along with us as well.
Play along with the experts, or the so-called experts?
You call yourself an expert. I don't know that I would give myself that title.
In my own head. In my own head.
I get people that listen. I think they listen more for you than they do for me.
I don't know about that.
Point, but either way, we will certainly get into that. But before we do, we should talk about some very relevant Cherokee County high school football news. First of all, Coach Shaw has stepped down from his position at Cherokee. We personally, and I'll just kind of speak from my point, and then you can add on to this as much as you would like. Coach Shaw has been doing this at Cherokee for the last 12 years, and obviously he was there when I first got my start in this job, and he has done a fantastic job with me. He's been more than friendly, more than willing to share information, and for that I am extremely grateful. He took over the program in 2012, led Cherokee to 7 different playoff appearances with 5 in a row from 18 to 22. He was the longest tenured high school head coach in Cherokee high school history, I should say, and has second all-time in wins with 55. Of course, there were a couple of games in there that I talked about in the article we wrote, but the one that stood out to me, and this was one that we were at, was when they snapped Cartersville's 63-game winning streak in regular season games, and that was in 2020. That was a lot of fun. So we wish Coach Shaw the best of luck wherever he decides to end up next. We will certainly miss him at Cherokee. Again, just wanted to extend that kind of feeling I have towards him, because I do really appreciate how open he was with me from the very beginning, being a kid that nobody really knew who I was or what I was doing, and he was more than happy to allow me to come in and learn about their program.
Yeah, I'm going to echo that, Coop. When I started the Turd Ferguson Report website, I think Coach Shaw was the first one to give me a follow and say, hey, I'm in for an interview or whatever you need, and constantly, week in and week out, since that first time, I think going back to 2017, 2018, whether it was getting statistics or coming in for an interview and just talking about his team, whether on the phone or just around Cherokee High School when we were at the stadium, he was always a pleasure to talk to, and very jovial. He allowed us to kind of to poke him a little bit. I always called him the pride of Adairsville.
Right.
That's not going to change for me. Got a chance to interact with his son this past season, great young man, Trey, and looking forward to kind of tracking his high school football career wherever he lands. But again, as you mentioned, I want to thank Coach Shaw and his contribution to the North Georgia Sports Network, his contribution to the Turd Ferguson Report, and Coach, we certainly do wish you and your family well, and are looking forward to seeing where you land and catching up at some point down the future.
Absolutely, and that does mean that Cherokee will be looking for a new head coach. Again, this has been one of the jobs that hasn't been open in a long time, so for anybody that's been looking to move back into the county, there might be a desirable position there. And again, we talked about some of the realignment last week. That looks like Cherokee's locked into that new highest classification of 6A, so probably a pretty attractive job for some folks out there. We will certainly keep you all updated on that position as well. But yeah, just wanted to extend that out to Coach Shaw and appreciate that. So Art, with that being said, let's move on to some of those scores from last week, one of those being Cherokee and Kennesaw Mountain. Cherokee sends Coach Shaw out on a high note, 38-8 win over Kennesaw Mountain. By all considerations, it was a frustration game for Cherokee. We knew that they had been a lot better than their 1-8 record had been up to that point, and it kind of culminated into this point where they were able to handle Kennesaw Mountain. I even think at halftime it was 28-0 or something. It was it was pretty pretty convincing win for the Warriors. So hopefully that'll be something that those players that will come back next year can be able to build off of with whoever takes over that program.
Yeah, I think that was a great way to send your seniors off, as you mentioned. Coach Shaw, getting a win on his what would end up being his last game as a head coach of Cherokee. So being able to go out with a dub, I think that's important. And then for the younger players, I think whoever comes in next, I think it's just that win, saying, okay, guys, we kind of figured this out a little bit, and I think good on Cherokee for getting that win. Had the longest playoff streak coming into this season at five consecutive seasons. So we hope that whoever they bring in will be able to kind of pick up where that we know that era kind of ended this season for Coach Shaw, but kind of pick up and start a new streak next season.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to seeing what the Warriors will put out next year. Again, of course, we always keep you updated on the website, so make sure you join us over at northgasportsnetwork.com, and we'll keep everyone up to date on any of the job openings that happen around the county and what we find out. Moving on, let's talk about Rome and Etowah for just a second here. I think it was probably what everybody expected. Rome won 65-0 over Etowah. Rome continues to be Rome. It is the quote of the day for a lot of different reasons, but Rome is Rome. And Etowah, of course, having to deal with some of the injuries, had a hard time getting things started. For the senior class of the Eagles, you feel really bad in some regard just because of how the season ended. Now, with that being said, you knew what Rome was going to be. And again, that game was at Barron Stadium, so there's even another level of challenge in that. So all of that put together, I do hate it for Etowah. They end their season 4-6, and they do miss the cut for the playoffs after dropping a couple games to Woodstock and Allatoona. But all things considered for Etowah, looking forward, they do bring a large portion of that talent back, hopefully a little bit more healthy. They will miss some big contributors, including Tate Nelms, including obviously Jack Strickland and Reese Weir as well. So we'll be interested to see what Etowah can put out on the field next year, but that's the wrap-up on that game at least.
Yeah, tough night for Etowah. As you mentioned, tough breaks. I don't know if there's a team that's faced any other breaks. I know Coach Kemper talked about that to us last time we had him on the podcast, and just kind of the freakiness of some of those injuries over there. Mm-hmm. But again, tough breaks. It was great to see Jack Strickland able to get back to the field of play and to at least give them some opportunity for offense. They had a chance. They hung around with River Ridge. They would have needed some help to make the playoffs. Certainly beat Rome last week, so that would have squashed any opportunity to make the postseason. But look, they were right there. They shoulda, coulda, woulda. I know that
right.
That we can always say that, but oh man, what could have been if the big three, Mahoney, Strickland and Reese Weir, would have been able to stay healthy. But again, it was at least to wrap this up for me. It's been exciting to watch those seniors play. I'm excited to see Mahoney come back and to see what he does again with some of those receivers, how he improves as a passer, just as a playmaker for Etowah. But hats off and salute to the Etowah Eagles senior class. Man, we appreciate you guys so much.
Absolutely. It's been great getting to know you guys and looking forward to see what you do in the next level of your lives, whether that be football or otherwise. Moving on, let's talk about our game of the week from last week. That was River Ridge and Allatoona. Big win for River Ridge, 50 points. Allatoona, they ended up scoring 29, but some of that may be a little deceiving just because of the pace of the game, especially in the second half. It got a little wild at times. But all things considered, I thought River Ridge played maybe their most complete game of the year. One thing that we will ask Coach Collins about when we get an interview with him, because, spoiler, we get to talk to all three of our playoff county coaches this week. So big shout out to all those guys for being with us. But one of the things that surprised us, I think, was we saw Nick Bryant on the defensive side of the ball and did a fantastic job on the linebacking core, was able to move side to side. He was very quick. The guy has a high motor. And then also one thing is both the defensive ends, and Mason McClendon and Michael Fallon, with the combination of John Fletcher at nose tackle, that three-man front there, those defensive ends were able to really cause some havoc and get some separation there, especially later in the second quarter and into the second half. I think in large part because Fletcher eats up 2-3 blocks at a time, and because of that, it does allow some one-on-one opportunities. So big shout-out to the River Ridge defense, who, all things considered, I know they gave up 29 to Allatoona, who's not scored that much, but it looked a lot better. It was a lot easier to watch, and when you get to the final score and it is 29, you kind of go back and look, and it's how did they even get there?
Right. Yeah, it's It was an interesting game, as you mentioned. One, they had I believe a defensive touchdown did at Alatoona that kind of helped try to get them back in the game. But once River Ridge, we were tied at 7 at one point, and once River Ridge kind of took off, they didn't look back. There was a period, I think, in the third quarter we thought, oh boy, this could get interesting. But a four score game up 29 points. It was tough sledding for Alatoona. They had thrown some different combinations in there. We saw a couple of different running backs. We used to Xavier Rucker. He didn't get as many carries. Sadiq Teal had some issues, throwing the ball. And credit that to the River Ridge secondary, who provided great coverage down the field. And, again, you mentioned the pressure that the defensive line were able to get, and then those linebackers. And of course, you mentioned Nick Bryant. Man, what a treat. What a coming out party for him. Just his speed, like you mentioned, just from sideline to sideline, just moved so well and really had a nose for the football.
It's a bit of a youth movement over there on the River Ridge side of the defensive ball right now because of the injuries that have happened at linebacker to them. We're talking about Matthew Burdett, the younger brother of Brandon Burdett. We're talking about, I believe it's Hunter DeRizo.
Yes.
Is that correct? The younger brother of...
Hunter DeRizo is the older brother.
The older brother? I got to find the...
Was it Harris? Now it's going to...
I'm going to find it. Hold on just a second.
I know if his dad listens to this, he's going to give me a hard time. Michael's going to give me a hard time.
Harris DeRizo, yeah, exactly. The sophomore. All those guys, though, just running all over the field. Miles Leslie was another guy we saw in there. So those are all sophomores, guys. So those are going to be kids that are going to be coming back to that program and having a couple more years in that system. The linebackers that River Ridge has put out have consistently been great when you talk about the Hunter Colemans of the world and guys like that. Obviously, Hunter DeRizo that we were talking about earlier. When you can think that they're going to have the opportunity to give these sophomores 2 years to develop, I'm really excited about this River Ridge defense moving forward. But focusing on this year, because their season's not over, I'd think that the depth that it provides when you do have those three guys, and of course, one thing that is fun to watch when you do this for as long as we've been doing it is you get to see those last names pop back up.
Yeah, the brothers and cousins maybe at some point. Mm-hmm. At some point, Coop, you might be in here long enough to say
called his dad?
Yeah.
I wouldn't go that. I'm not that old yet.
Not yet.
Yeah.
But at some point we will be. In any event, Coop, and then offensively, of course, the 1-2 punch of Cox and Pugh was outstanding. You talk about that youth movement on both sides of football. It's exciting for River Ridge, and with the win, we get to talk about them like you mentioned this week.
Absolutely. We'll do that in just a moment. Before we do that,
hey, before we do that, we had some region champs crowned this week that I know we don't spend a lot of time on this, but we had 2 region champs crowned over this past week in cheerleading.
Yeah, we did. I was about to say, I didn't know if you were going in the North Georgia direction or if you were going in the Cherokee County direction.
Yeah, Cherokee County, man.
Yeah, it's Creekview and Cherokee.
Absolutely. We just want to give them a shout-out on the podcast. I mean, we are the North Georgia Sports Network, not the North Georgia Football Network. So we want to shout out those Cherokee County cheerleaders. And, they're out there. They're out there practicing early, practicing late. And I think both of these teams also qualified, placed high enough in sectionals where they qualify for the state tournament. So
I don't really know how that works in cheerleading. What we need is, because we are trying to diversify our portfolio here.
Sure.
We really need somebody from these sports that we don't know a ton about how the stuff works inside of it to teach us.
Right.
Because I have no idea.
And you know what? It would probably take me like a long time to figure it out. I mean, like even
somebody smarter than us knows.
Exactly. So maybe we'll have a cheerleading correspondent at some point in the future.
Send your applications.
But we did want to shout out to those young ladies and men and women. I can't remember if there are any young men on those cheer squads, but in any event, congratulations to you all. Good luck at sectional states upcoming.
Absolutely. Yep, great point there. And we should also throw in this point that we are covering basketball still. We just haven't gotten there yet. Yeah. I know the season starts this week, and we are trying to figure out what we're going to do. But just want to throw that out there for anybody that keeps tuning in. There's going to be one person who's tuning in for the basketball thing, and it's like, why do you guys keep talking about football? It's basketball season. So we're getting there, I promise. We're working on it. It's just been a long day. Either way, let's jump into our final Cherokee County game of the week from last week. That was Sequoyah and Woodstock.
Yep.
Sequoyah with a big win, 49-14. It was closer at half than that. They ended up separating in the third quarter. Jackson Hancock was all over the place. Stop me if you've heard that story before. But other than that, Sequoyah and Woodstock, that's probably a score that holds serve. I think the thing that's most enlightening about that is the fact that Sequoyah is able to put up points. We saw them put up some big numbers against Allatoona, and you and I had the conversation thinking, hopefully that's not just a flash in the pan. This is something that can maintain, because that has been the difference for Sequoyah over the past couple of years, has been their lack of ability to score points, and it looks like they've righted that ship. And we'll talk to Coach Teter about that in a little bit. But then for the Woodstock side, a loss there for their final game of the year. They go 2-8. But, you and I have talked about it at length here, and I think it's a good time just to put a little bow on it, is that when you talk about Woodstock having the win on the road and then the region win and, all the different things they were able to overcome this year to get to that 2-8 record, including a win at home in the region or in the scrimmage game.
Right.
I think that Woodstock's going to be on the right path. So we're very excited about the direction Woodstock is headed, and it makes things for us a lot easier because, we love when all 6 of our county schools are great, and when they're not, it is a little difficult. So Woodstock is in the right direction, and we're looking forward to seeing what Coach Devine and his staff over there can do as they move forward into next year.
Yeah, Coop, I would say, I'll start from Woodstock and then go to Sequoyah. I would say they're probably a little bit, in my opinion, not Coach Devine's opinion, he probably might disagree with you. I would say they're a little bit ahead of schedule from what we thought this season, picking up the region win and also separately the first win to break that long drought. So I think this team is, they'll have to replace a few key starters. We know that Somerville on the defensive line will be gone. You're replacing their quarterback, but they've got somebody waiting in the wings.
There's a lot. That's the one thing I would say is that senior class for them is pretty deep, because you are going to lose guys like
even the offensive line.
Cam Levette's going to be gone. But then I start thinking about, they've had some transfers in, like you mentioned, obviously. But one guy that's going to be back is Kaheem Davis. I think he's a huge part of that. But when you start talking about the fact that, the Tate Washington, I think, Nate's a junior, but Tate Washington is a senior. He's going to be gone. That's going to be a tough one. And then, the back end for them is pretty senior as well. JT Richardson and Brody Mullins, both those guys at safety, and then Tobias Sally kind of at corner there, who's a senior as well. They're going to have some pieces they need to replace, but I do think the key to that is that it looks like they're going to be able to bring back guys like Cooper Price. I mentioned Kaheem Davis again. He's a guy that transferred in pretty early in the season. He's a big deal, I think. I think he's going to be a guy that people should keep an eye on. Drew Burmeister going into his junior year. The fact he comes back is huge. We mentioned Tate graduating, but Nate Washington, the brother, is still going to be there. And even Trace Washington, who got some starts at linebacker, he's a freshman. So I agree with you. I think there's some elements there in that senior class that you will certainly miss, obviously. And, on the offensive side of the ball, Peyton Lynch and some of those guys that we've come to know a little bit more. But there's certainly some youth over there at Woodstock that will be interesting to watch, especially knowing that you're going to get Chase Kalina back, and you're also going to get some guys like Will Furstein, Isaiah Payton back as well. And I think Woodstock's going to be a heck of a team in a couple years. I think that even next year they might be on the cusp of that playoff, depending on what happens. But we have a long way to go till then, so I'm going to get back to your point and not interrupt you anymore.
Hey, no problem. Those are great points you brought up. I appreciate you bringing them up, Coop. I'm going to switch gears now and talk about Sequoyah. I'll ask Coach Teter this when we get on, because I think that was one of the questions we had talked about. Do you rest your guys going into that last game, knowing that you're already solidified as a number 2 seed or not? And I want to get his thoughts on that. And as you mentioned, that game started out a little slow. I think as a rivalry game in county, that's something that you probably Woodstock was going to give you your best punch, throw their best punches, and they did. Sequoyah was able to withstand that, and then, like you mentioned, pull away. Right now, I think just from a player-to-player basis, probably got a few more athletes over there at Sequoyah. But great job by the Chiefs closing that out and going into the playoffs with a win and stringing together a few victories. You talked about the points they scored. If you look at them for the course of the season, those numbers aren't impressive, but it's almost like a tale of 2 seasons and some of the opponents they played, what they've been able to do is in terms of putting up points late in the season. And I think that's important and gives that offense confidence. So Sequoyah doing a great job over there actually throwing the ball, Will, and that's one thing I want to ask Coach Teter about. Is it the Air Teter, Air Jack Mine, Air Martin, whatever's going on there? There's a movement, and they're getting it done through the air. I don't think they're really going away from the ground game. It's just an additional wrinkle, and I want to mention that Coach Teter, is one thing. I know a couple weeks ago we saw that Martin threw for over 300 yards. That's something that hadn't been done since like 2015, 16.
I think we found out it was 2015.
Yeah. And so, again, Sequoyah looking pretty good heading into the playoffs, and they'll have a very challenging opponent, and we'll talk about that shortly.
Absolutely. Well, we will have a full post-season show. We always do this kind of to celebrate the end of the season. We put out some, awards and some things like that, and we will still do that. So make sure you stay tuned for that episode. It'll probably be a couple of weeks after the season wraps up, and we have some time to sit and talk about things as they progress. But we still do that, so if you're a fan of any of the three schools that are not in the playoffs, just stay tuned for that one, and we'll keep you updated on that. But for now, it's playoff time. Are you ready?
I'm ready. While we're talking about playoffs, Coop, I know we're gonna run this during the game, but we got a sponsor for this, right?
We do. We do have a sponsor. We have a special playoff sponsor, which we're very thankful for. It is Tina Kugel Photography, which is TEENA COOGLE Photography, and she does Santa pictures.
Okay.
With one of the best Santas. The guy, I'll tell you this. I know him personally. He's a good friend. He ordered his suit from Hollywood.
Wait a minute. You know the real Santa?
I do know the real Santa.
Man.
So,
dude, how did I not know this?
Well, one of the benefits of being my friend.
I tell you. Something new every day.
That's
But go ahead.
exactly right.
I digress.
But one of the things that I can tell you about him is he actually ordered his Santa suit from Hollywood.
Wow.
It's legit. Okay, so this isn't the Walmart Santa or the Sears Santa that you're used to having. Okay, this is a serious Santa thing, and they have a Mrs. Claus.
Okay.
It just so happens that his wife looks just like Mrs. Claus. I don't know if they planned that, and that's why they got married or what, but it's actually kind of weird when you see them in July.
Yeah.
Because it really does look like Santa and Mrs. Claus just hanging out. So either way, definitely recommend it. They do it in a place over in Canton. You can listen and find more information. Again, TinaKugelPhotography.com, TEENACOOGLE.
Is it .com or .net?
.com for the photography side.
I gotcha. Thanks for clarifying that.
You bet. So that is one of the better things that you can do in Cherokee County around this time. A lot of fun goes into it. It's a full set. So you pay for it, and you get to talk to Mrs. Claus. Santa listens to what you want for Christmas, all the whole stuff.
Man, you know what? I feel like I missed out. You mentioned the Sears Santa. I used to go see Santa at the Sears and Roebuck. I'm that old. It was called
Get the catalog, right?
Yeah. You wouldn't know about that.
No,
life,
I would
man.
not.
I tell you, that's the good old days. But anyway, appreciate Tina Kugel for helping sponsor our broadcast this week. That's awesome. So now that we've talked about that, let's talk about our games.
All right. Well, we normally go in alphabetical order.
Yeah.
I want to go in seed order.
Okay.
So let's go from lowest to highest.
Okay.
So the lowest is, of course, River Ridge at the 4 seed. They're going to be facing Roswell this week. That game will be at Roswell. We talked about the game just a minute ago, but a big win over Allatoona. Really impressed with what River Ridge was able to put out on the field. I think that offense may be firing on all cylinders here, especially with the addition of guys like Micah Pugh that you were talking about, who has been huge in that running game. You combine him with a guy like Camden Cox. One of the things that's interesting to me is they're not different backs. They are very similar in the way they run, but they get stuff done. It's almost like just having them fresh so consistently helps in such a big way, because Cox came in and Cox had two rushing touchdowns, but Pugh was in between the 20s all the time and was really the bell cow. So those two guys, as you mentioned, Cox is a sophomore, Pugh's a freshman. That's going to be a heck of a running back stable at River Ridge for a while. So that's a big thing. The other thing I wanted to mention is the offensive side of the ball. They go so deep on receiver that we were talking about. Well, we've seen Isaiah Coughlin get involved a little bit more, but Andrew Hand, our player of the week, I don't know if you guys have seen the clip. If you haven't, you should go check out our social media page and watch the Player of the Week video. That video where he outruns everyone on the field, okay? Bryce Stack, who he outruns, who's coming from behind him in that, is a verified 21.6 mile per hour top speed guy. And Andrew Hand just flat outruns that dude.
Right.
Okay.
Ran away from him.
Division I speed on Andrew Hand. So those guys are huge. And, of course, Grant Hollier, the reliable target, he had 2 touchdowns. It's almost like at this point when you see River Ridge have a big game and you see a guy like Grant Hollier, you're like, yeah, well, that's just what Grant does. And you kind of scroll past it. But when you actually stop to think about the contributions that each of those guys has to this offense, it's unbelievable. And, of course, John Fletcher, Daniel Green, those guys on the front do such a good job for River Ridge. So the offense is going to be all right. The question for this week is the defense, because Roswell has the number 1 scoring offense in 6A. They've put up over 70 points, I believe, 3 times this year. They've put up over 80 once. They beat Lassiter by 84, or they beat Lassiter and they scored 84. They only beat them by 77. So only. But Roswell beats people. They just beat them. Their only loss came to Milton. They're 9-1 coming into this, and they lost to Milton, who was the region champ in 7A in that area. So it's a tough matchup, but the thing I'll say for River Ridge is they went to Langston Hughes last year, and this game's not any worse than that.
Yeah, Coop, very similar opponent. You've got one of the top teams in Class 6A in the Roswell Hornets. You talked about their scoring prowess. It is absolutely unbelievable and uncanny what they've been able to do this season. You've got a couple of players I want to mention up front, probably guys that probably don't get as much press or run as they should, but offensive lineman Anthony Knapp, I believe he's headed to Notre Dame or will be at the season's end. Going to be somebody that, Roswell depends heavily on. Nakai Davenport, their running back, has been a big key and a big cog to their success. He's got, over 1,100 yards rushing this season and I believe 19 touchdowns. So he's a guy they can really depend on. KJ Smith, second-year starter. Yeah. He saw a little bit of action his sophomore year. We talked about that before. Robbie Roper kind of got hurt a little partway through that season, and Roswell had a magical run that season a few years ago. KJ Smith was a part of that staff, had played some key minutes. Now he's also thrown for over 1,500 yards and got 25 touchdown passes. So it'll be incumbent upon the River Ridge defense to get some pressure on Smith. That's easier said than done when you have a verified running game, a ground game that can get the job done. So not a one-trick pony are the Roswell Hornets. And they've got a couple of different receivers, Dylan Williams at receiver and also Sinquan Smith. I'm not going to say they're the only receivers, but they're the top receivers for Roswell. You got to find a way to cover those. You got to think that Revis McLaren, Andrew Handel have their hands busy. And again, if it's something where Smith, who's not the tallest quarterback, it's standing at 5'11", not the tallest quarterback, but can they put enough pressure on him to get him out of the pocket and get him off schedule? I'm interested to see. We've seen now back-to-back weeks where John Faletra has played both offensive line and defensive line, as you mentioned, playing that nose tackle, nose guard position, and really eating up a lot of space. Will he line up against Knapp on that side of the ball, and will he be able to have some of the success that he's had? And this week or last week we saw, it's one thing to get up there and lean on somebody, but Faletra's down there chasing the ball downfield. I mean, he's 6'4", 300 pounds. It's not a small guy.
Well, that and Allatoona has a guy by Alex Gerger, who's 6'6", 360 pounds.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of people in this world that can make John Faletra look normal size.
Right.
And I don't say he makes him look small because he didn't.
Right.
But it just makes him look like a normal guy. Well, Gerger was one of them. And Faletra, multiple times, ate his lunch.
Yeah.
Just being honest with you. So, Fletcher's a guy that is a playmaker and is very dynamic in that sense. We've seen River Ridge do that. Jackson Head last year ended up playing defensive end a time or two. And I think that interior space eater is something in a 3-4 defense that is so key to developing the rest of it, because it becomes a numbers game. Because your center, unless this is a very high-level offensive line, he can't block Fletcher on his own. He's too big.
Right.
So you do have to dedicate a guard to at least help chip or, spend some time with him. And that does allow one of the defensive ends to get a one-on-one matchup. And as Allatoona learned the hard way, Michael Fallon and Mason McClendon are going to be good enough coming off of those edges that you're probably not going to have a good time if that's what ends up happening. Yeah,
again, Smith has the ability to run a Roswell quarterback, but I think he prefers to sit back and throw the ball in the pocket, be in the pocket, throw the ball. And again, Davenport does most of that rushing. So it's going to be a tough matchup. Coop, we talked about this offline. If there is any team, it's that could, from this region outside of Rome, certainly,
right,
that could match up with Roswell with a puncher's chance, is a team like River Ridge, who's got a propensity to put up some points.
I was going to see what the over-under is.
I would have to say with Roswell involved, it's got to be close to 90.
That's probably not far off. Do you want to make a guess before I find it?
I'm going to say 87.
71.
Okay, so I'm off by 16 points, by a couple touchdowns.
Hammering the over.
Yeah, I am.
71, I'm taking the over.
Yeah, it's always been the case with River Ridge, right?
Yep.
I think River Ridge, and kind of closing this out, at least from my perspective, River Ridge is a team that will get on the board, score some points, but I think Roswell's probably got a little bit more firepower this week, and they're playing at home at Mena Stadium, and so I like the Hornets.
It's tough not to pick Roswell just because of what they've done, but to be fair, if there is one coach that you can trust who is capable of pulling off the upset, it is Coach Collins. And again, I think their experience from last year, having played Langston Hughes and making that trip as the 4 seed, going to play that 1 seed that everybody kind of feels like is that state power, certainly helps, at least gives them a competitive chance. So we'll talk to Coach Collins here in just a moment, but before we do that, some history between the two teams. First time these teams are meeting, they haven't played before, and it's the first time that Coach Collins is going to be going up against Pruitt, who is the head coach over at Roswell. I believe it's Chris Pruitt, isn't that his first name? So Chris Pruitt and Coach Collins, their first meeting all time, so not a ton there. And the winner of this game will play the winner of Lanier and East Paulding, which I would assume if you're a River Ridge fan, you'd rather play East Paulding.
Yeah. I think
it's not that different, but
yeah, but I think so.
If you beat Roswell, then
Lanier is a team that's on the rise. They've been to the Final Four. They've been a threat deep in the playoffs a few years back. Had a coaching change. That's a team that's on the rise. So I think you want to, East Paulding's probably the better matchup, but I think you like your chances on either one of those games.
After beating Roswell, you certainly have to. So either way, we have Coach Collins calling in right now. Let's get to that interview and talk to Coach. Joining us now is the head coach at the River Ridge Knights, Coach Michael Collins. Coach, thank you for being back with us.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here, fellas.
Absolutely, Coach. We always look forward to it. We got to watch your game on Friday against Allatoona. I want to revisit that for just a second before we jump into the playoff talk. You guys were able to score in bunches, and it looked like maybe for the first time in a while you guys played well on both sides of the ball. The defense was flying around. But one guy that really stood out to us was Nick Bryant on the defensive side of the ball. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about his transition over to the defensive side of the ball and how you felt he did on Friday.
Yeah, I've been waiting on that moment to see us click on all 3 phases. So I agree. I was glad to see us finally get going on all those phases. And Nick in particular, he's a guy that we've been doing all we can to get on the field. He works mainly at receiver, but we knew he's a very talented young man. He's a hard worker. He plays with his hair on fire. So it was something that we've been tampering with a little bit. Maybe some third down plays, trying to get some pass rush out of him, maybe, and it just came down to trying to find some guys to mirror that dual threat quarterback that they had. And he was the first on the board for us to try out, and we tried it out during the week, and man, he was flying around, and we loved it. And there was no doubt that he was going to leave it all on the field, and that's what he did Friday. I'm so glad to see him have a breakthrough game on that side of the ball, and I think the sky's going to be the limit for him. And again, I'm just so excited his name's getting mentioned because he's a very talented young man that plays his heart out, and I think he's going to be a name that everybody's going to know by the time the dust settles for his career.
Coach, you had a big win on Friday, for a couple of different reasons. You advanced for the postseason again for the 3rd time in 4 years. You also, in the process, picked up your 100th win, and I know I'm not going to try to ask you to compare those 2 milestones, but as a coach, what do those 2 milestones mean for you individually?
Well, for me, at some point, hopefully, I'll be blessed enough to sit back and look at it and really appreciate it. But just for a brief moment for me, it was just really having an opportunity to look back at some of the folks that I've been able to work with as far as my coaches and some of the wonderful young men that I've coached along the way and are still coaching presently, and some of the awesome community members that have been there to help lift up our football program. So it did give me an opportunity to kind of reflect for a second, but I really never tried to do that long because the most important thing to me is about the success of our young men. So I was definitely way more excited to see us able to get Rivers football back into the playoffs again in consecutive years for the first time. We had a really tough October. And so for those guys that persevere through all that moment and have a chance to play some extra football, I thought it was just phenomenal. What a great job by them. It's hanging in there with the philosophies that we preach. And so I was just so excited for them and our community to have this opportunity.
Well, Coach, you mentioned it, first time in back-to-back years and the third time in 4 years. Really good stuff at River Ridge. I want to ask, last year, obviously going back-to-back, you guys were in a very similar situation where you were the 4th seed and you went to Langston Hughes. Now this year you get to face Roswell instead of Langston Hughes, but both of those teams are similar in some ways regarding the points they put up. Did you learn anything from that experience, making that trip down there last year, that can help you this week?
Well, I think it's I think you learn that there's only 32 teams left in the state, so there's a good chance you're going to run into a good football team when you play it this week. And I don't think this week will be an exception. So I think our guys are going to be a lot more relaxed this year than they were the last time. I felt like we were really a little tense in our approach last year. I see it this week in practice. I think there's a lot more relaxation going on. I think these guys are using that experience to know, look, so it's a football game. The most important thing we can do is just go play the best that we can, play it one play at a time. I'm glad it's a shorter trip for us, but I think that trip last year is going to help us in this trip this year.
Coach, in terms of preparation, and we asked a couple of our other coaches this question, is there anything that changes for you this week? You mentioned that the guys are more relaxed, and some of that comes from experience, certainly. But in terms of your preparation, is there anything for you all that changes this or a different sense of urgency for you all, or is it business as usual?
No, it doesn't change for me, for us in our program. As we go throughout the season and we get into those latter weeks, we start tapering off our reps a little bit. We try to get off the grass a little earlier. And this week is similar. The later we go into the season, the more we cut down on the reps. But it's business as usual, other than as we just start tapering off as we get to week 7, week 8, week 9. This is week 11. So the reps have been cut down a little bit more, and that's just to save legs. So other than that, the approach hasn't changed at all. It's still the same routine in the weight room, the same routine Monday through Thursday practices. So we always try to keep the routine, and I think that's really important that we do that to stay consistent with our players.
Coach, when we talk about the experience that you got from the Langston Hughes game, obviously that was last year's team, but this year's team has faced a couple of really, really good teams, especially offensively in Rome and North Atlanta. How do you think those games might be able to help your team, considering that it was actually this year?
Yeah, I think it's going to help a lot. I think it makes you aware of the speed of the game and what the speed is going to look like, and I think it encourages you as a defense to play faster. It's why you schedule games like North Atlanta, and also Sprayberry. I thought had a very explosive offense, and obviously Rome is Rome. So I think those experiences are huge for you going into a game like this with Roswell. To get that experience on both sides of the ball and special teams, to kind of know this is the speed of the game that we know we need to be at. And again, I feel like that's helped us. You can kind of tell our approach this week. I think the guys also know that, like, okay, we've seen what this is going to be like, so we're a little more prepared for it this time.
Coach, as you, again, on the phone with Coach Mike Collins, the head coach of the River Ridge Knights, going to their second consecutive playoff game. As you turn on the tape this week for Roswell, you mentioned team speed as one of those things, but when you flip on the tape, what keeps you up at night, and what will you guys have to do to be successful and shock the state of Georgia on Friday night?
Yeah, you said it. The first thing is the team speed. And let me tell you, it's 1 through 11. Probably coaches running 4.2s and cheerleaders and they're fast program. You probably can't even put on the helmet if you're not extremely fast. So that's the first thing. Is just the team speed is something that I think is the one concern. And to bottle that up, we got to get a lot of hats to the football, and we're going to play fast, and we're going to have to try to outnumber them in every situation. And we're going to have 2 guys to 1 in everything that happens on that field Friday. 1-to-1 is probably not going to be a good matchup for us. So we've been really working hard on that. We got to win the turnover battle as always. When we win the turnover battle, it usually goes well for us. And we need to play the game at our tempo. Whatever we decide that tempo to be, it needs to be dictated by us and not allow them to dictate the pace of the game. And I think special teams is going to be huge. When you have speed like they do, special teams is an opportunity for them to have an explosive play. So not only avoid that explosive play on offense, but we got to try to avoid it on special teams as well. And I believe if we can do those things, check those boxes, we'll be in that fight on Friday night. And you know as well as I do, if you can make it a 4-quarter game, anything can happen.
Yes, sir.
Well, Coach, we are certainly looking forward to seeing that game and seeing what comes of it. We wish you the best of luck. We'll be keeping a close eye on it, and we hope that we get a chance to talk to you next week on the podcast.
Oh, man, that would be awesome. As always, guys, I really appreciate you. It's always great talking football with you.
So, again, thank you to Coach Collins for being with us, and best of luck to the Knights as they make the trip over to Roswell, and we're looking forward to keep an eye on that score. If you are not able to make it out to the game, join us on stationhead.com. The Stationhead app will be keeping an update on that game, of course, as we will some other games around the area, but we will be focusing on our 3 Cherokee County teams, especially in this point in the season being playoff week number 1. Well, with that being said, let's move on to another team that will be making the trip over to Roswell, this time to Blessed Trinity High School. That is the Creekview Grizzlies as our number 3 seed. This is actually going to be our game of the week. We should preface why. We've gotten some questions as to why we picked this one.
Yes, pray tell, Coop.
First of all, our good friends over at Sequoyah with Chiefs TV, they do a fantastic job. They're handling their home game against Alpharetta. Before that reason, we did not feel like we needed to cover Sequoyah because Chiefs TV not only provides you with the same great coverage that we do, but they also provide you with a video copy as well. So make sure if you haven't, go to YouTube, check out Chiefs TV, and you can watch the live broadcast there. Our good friends Max Swaim does a great job, and of course, Coach Mann over there does a fantastic job putting that all together. So
student run too, by the way. I mean, you know, Coach Mann is out there providing the educational supervisory experience there, but that is a student run from the camera people to the play-by-play, the editing, all done by students. So
graphics.
Great job over there at Chiefs TV. Again, like you said, Coop, anyone who hasn't had a chance to take in one of their broadcasts, I'd highly recommend it. Yeah, so certainly check out our friends at Chiefs TV. Again, that's on YouTube. It's free of charge, so any fan of Cherokee County football can watch that, and you certainly should. So that was number 1. Number 2, it became kind of a decision between Creekview and Blessed Trinity and River Ridge and Roswell. Both teams have NFHS coverage, so that wasn't the determining factor there, but what we decided was because Creekview was the higher seed and we had seen River Ridge the week before, that we would go with Creekview, and then from there on we would have further discussions about whoever wins. So either way, that's how we ended up on Creekview and Blessed Trinity. It's not a favoritism thing. I don't think anybody thinks that it is. I just want to point that out. Hopefully that answers some questions and makes some sense. I mean, I could see where somebody would say it's a favoritism thing.
Not on my part.
Well, I mean, you're an alum.
Okay. And you love to throw that in. You throw it in about once a month on the podcast, well, just to remind people.
Is it a lie?
I mean, I can't argue with that.
I mean, I can tell you, like, I can tell the people that I know that you are not a Creekview homer from that perspective, even being an alum. So yeah, that's why we're over there at Creekview. At Blessed Trinity. And hopefully River Ridge shock the world, or Sequoyah win this one, and we'll take another road trip next week.
Yeah, we don't care to go on the road.
Not at all.
We have cars.
Yes,
we're very mobile. Either way, let's talk about Creekview and Blessed Trinity here. Blessed Trinity 8-2 on the year. Their 2 losses to Marist and Roswell. Marist also a region champ in 6A. They are they ranked in your top 10? I don't think they are.
The Marist War Eagles are ranked. I believe they're at the bottom.
Okay.
But yeah, I have a high regard. This is a sidebar, but Coach Alan Chadwick is the current winningest head coach of all time in the state of Georgia. I have a lot of respect for him and the way they run their program over at Marist. They've been a model of consistency.
Well, one thing about Blessed Trinity outside of Marist is that their defense is fantastic, one of the best in the state of Georgia. They're allowing 11.5 points per game. If you take out the Roswell game, they're allowing about 10. So they're very good defensively. It's going to be tough in that regard. Blessed Trinity is also 4-0 against Creekview when you talk about the historical aspect. Now, none of this is in the playoffs. This is all from regular season matchups in the past, and it's been a while since these two teams have played, but there is some familiarity there. But this is the first matchup between Coach Williams and Ed Dudley, who is the head coach at Blessed Trinity, who has plenty of coaching pedigree. He's been doing this for a while and is a very good coach and continues to improve his resume over at Blessed Trinity. So either way, this is going to be an interesting game. To me, the difference comes down to whether Creekview can score enough. I think a team that allows 11.5 points per game, Creekview their offense averages scoring over the average by about 3 points, so that puts them at 14. I don't think that's enough to win this one. I think they need to get into the 20s, if not the high 20s, to really start thinking about this being competitive. So who is it going to take to get there? I think one of the things we saw in the Rome game was guys like Nick Vaccaro, Nathan Agamang step up in a big way. I think those guys are going to have to continue to develop. And then getting Michael Roach back healthy would be a big thing. He didn't play in the Rome game. He's a big factor in that offense. And then, of course, continuing to develop the running game, running behind Andrew Rosinski, Fernando Zarita, those guys on the front on each side that can pull and do such a good job is going to be key for this Creekview team moving into this one. So I don't really worry about Creekview giving up 30-plus points in this one. That's not my concern. The concern is what they can do offensively and how consistently they can score.
Yeah, I think that's you bring up a great point, Coop. One thing I do want to mention, these teams do have a common opponent, as both these teams did play Calhoun. Blessed Trinity won that game 17-7. Creekview fell 28-14, I believe, was the score as they went on the road to Calhoun early in the season. I don't know how much you can draw from that. Again, Blessed Trinity opened up the season with Calhoun. Interesting scores. The Blessed Trinity Alpharetta game, I was very interested in that score. It was a 6-point victory over Alpharetta. Blessed Trinity also played Roswell pretty tight. It was a 10-point ball game. I know it was a road game for Roswell, but literally across the street.
Yeah.
So I think the Titans do have, save for the Marist game, have played well at home this season. It's in spite of that loss to Roswell. I wonder how much of this, Creekview being on the road, and I'm not bringing up the home and away splits again, but in the playoffs, in that environment, how much experience do the Grizzlies have? And my other question is, how much experience did these Titans have? Because this is a younger Titan team, a team that is, at least at the skill position, probably a little bit younger than what we're used to. And some of the times that, the J.D. Bertrands have long gone, the Steel Chambers, they're long gone. I believe Deldrick Franklin, long gone. Those kind of kids are long gone for Blessed Trinity. So this is a team, they got bounced in the first round last year by North Forsyth, a team that, again, early in the season, Creekview beat last year. So that's, you can't – those are kind of apples and oranges here. But I'm very curious about this game. I think this has the makings of this is a classic 2-3 matchup where you've got two teams that are going to battle. Brooks Goodman, starting quarterback, he's thrown for over 1,200 yards. He's completing 65% of his passes. He's, over the course of the season, 14 different receivers have caught balls. Zion McKenzie's probably the top receiver. Quinn Davis has come along well. He's got a brother who's had some success at Blessed Trinity going years back. Again, talking about some of those Blessed Trinity Creekview matchups. Amonte Pitts is the leading rusher. He's only got 538 yards. I say only. That's still enough to keep teams honest, and he's a pretty good-looking running back. Probably see a lot of zone run plays from this Blessed Trinity offense. They've sacked opposing quarterbacks 23 times, so we talk a lot about Creekview's offensive line. Can they hold up against this Blessed Trinity defensive front and those linebackers, that front seven for Blessed Trinity? I'm interested to see that lineup. If you see Austin Guest rip off chunk yardage, I think Creekview's got a great opportunity. You mentioned the receivers coming on, and I'm going on and on and on here. I know, but look, it's a classic matchup. I think where I don't know if anybody has a distinct advantage other than Blessed Trinity having playing in the confines of their own stadium this week.
Yeah, and I think you bring up an extra interesting point with Austin Guest being the mobile quarterback. I think that's something that we saw a little bit later in the Roswell game, was him rolling out of the pocket and throwing on the run. I think that's something that they can certainly take advantage of against a Blessed Trinity team that sideline to sideline may be a little bit more vulnerable than Rome was. Now, that's not saying much considering what Rome is, but I think that Creekview has a fair shot in this game, but it is going to depend largely on the ability of Austin Guest to develop some plays and buy some time, because I think he's going to need to do that from time to time. And then establishing the running game, which is the oldest cliche in the book, but I do think that is so important because the games that Creekview has won have been because of the running game, or even like when they beat Etowah, it wasn't because they ran the ball super effectively. It was because Etowah thought they were going to run the ball super effectively, and it forced them into things. The interesting thing for Creekview, They just came off a bye week. The last week of the season was a bye week for them. So they've had an extra week to prepare for things, and they kind of knew that Blessed Trinity was going to be the opponent. They didn't know for 100% sure, but they were relatively sure. So that kind of adds a level to it as well that I'm going to be interested to see what the Grizzlies can do because off of a bye week and moving into the playoffs, you got to feel like that group is A, recharged, but B, fired up.
Yeah, and that they should be. I think this is a group that maybe last year probably underperformed even to their standards, not making the postseason. I think it's a group over there that's probably a little bit salty, and not in a bad way, but just salty enough to say, hey, we believe we should be a team that's hosting a first-round playoff game, and here's an opportunity for them to prove it. Now, I'm not saying that just because you feel that way that you're going to come out and get the results you want. They're going to have to go out and play a full 48 minutes of football here on Friday night and against a very capable opponent. One more player on the defensive end I want to mention, DJ Jacobs, freshman, second on the team in tackles right now, and this kid's already got Power 5 offers as a freshman. Coop, he is legit 6'4" in height. He's got long wingspan. They'll line him up at linebacker and defensive end. So a challenge for those tackles and the H-back for the Grizzlies to make sure they keep Guest clean and make sure he's got all day to throw the football. If Blessed Trinity is unable to get pressure on Guest, it's going to be a long night for Blessed Trinity.
I agree. Well, I'll tell you, let's talk to the head man at Creekview. That is, of course, Coach Williams. He's joining us right now on the phones. Let's get to that interview. Coach, thank you for being back with us.
Thanks for having me, guys. That means we get to play one more week of football at least, so that's good to be playing this time of year.
Absolutely, Coach. That's what we look forward to as well in November. Of course, the playoffs start this week, and you guys are in an interesting position because you had a bye week last week in the last week of the regular season. You didn't know for 100% that Blessed Trinity was going to be your opponent going into that week, but probably had a good idea that's the way that it would shake out. Did you spend that week looking at Blessed Trinity, or did you guys focus more on yourself and some things you wanted to get corrected?
A little bit of both. It's a balance between getting their legs back up underneath them, getting them a couple days off, trying to prepare the best you can, but really focus on us and what we do well and what we've got to do well in the playoffs to continue to play.
Coach, now that you're in the playoffs, or now that we're in the playoffs here at this time of year, do you approach the game, the preparation, any differently than a regular season matchup? Is there a different sense of urgency, or what does that look like for you and your staff?
I think from a coaching standpoint, you want to keep it as normal as possible for the players. Obviously, I think for the seniors, there's an added sense of urgency, not knowing if Tuesday's full pads practice is the last full pads practice. Wednesday morning, if it's the last Wednesday morning practice. So I think there's a sense of urgency there. But as coaches, we just try to take it as the next opponent, and you got to find a way to try to go 1-0 5 times.
Coach, this will be your third playoff game as a head coach. Did you learn anything from the first two games that will help you this week?
Man, it's hard to win playoff games in 6A football in the state of Georgia. I know that. There are no easy first-round matchups. There are no easy matchups in general. But, it comes down to the stuff that we preach all the time. You got to be able to run the football. You got to be able to stop the run on defense. You got to protect the ball offensively, and then you got to create some turnovers. If you can do those four things, you give yourself a great chance in November.
Coach, and again, on the phone with Coach Trevor Williams, the head coach of the Creekview Grizzlies, as his team will go over to Roswell to face the Blessed Trinity Titans on Friday night. I want to talk about a couple of guys on your team that we saw last time y'all played. As we mentioned, you had a bye week coming into this week. Last week. But last time out, you guys ran into a buzzsaw, as most teams do when they face Rome. But a couple of players that stood out to us as we broadcast that game, Nathan Agamang and Nick Vaccaro, a couple of young receivers that had to step in. We were impressed by some of their abilities. What's been their growth this season, and how does that add to the depth on your football team?
Yeah, it's been tremendous. Nathan does a great job. They both do really of blocking on the perimeter and being ready when their number's called. Obviously, Cal and Michael Roach and those guys, Jackson Stanley, have played a lot of football and have a great chemistry with Austin. But those two guys are added weapons, and the length that they provide on the outside is huge. And, man, you were just waiting on both those guys to have that game. And no better time to have it than against the best team in the region. But
those guys are capable of taking the roof off the defense and making plays with their feet after they catch it. So that was nice to see, and looking forward to having those guys in the playoffs.
And, Coach, talking about offense, you guys are going to be facing one of the top defenses in 6A with Blessed Trinity allowing just over 11 points per game. What do you think it'll take for you guys to be a little bit more successful than some of the teams that Blessed Trinity has faced so far on the offensive side of the ball?
Yeah, you got to stay balanced. They don't give you anything easy. They're 3-4 up front, and their front seven's really, really good. They play match coverage in the back end. They're going to make you earn everything. We're going to have to stay balanced. I don't think it can be one of those games where you're 70-30 on the ground. I think it's got to be, a more balanced attack to kind of keep them guessing and be able to get some first downs early in drives and extend those drives.
Well, Coach, as always, we appreciate you joining us this week. As you mentioned, Blessed Trinity is your opponent, and you mentioned some of the things, the balance. This is a game, a team where you all have played. I would say historically, I think you had about 4 games back to back. You're going on the road. Is this road trip any different than your road trip at Carrollton a few years ago, or does the proximity change things for you all this week?
Absolutely. Number one, we're playing on Friday, not Saturday. We had to play on Saturday in 21 and, get them up to the school for breakfast and kind of extend the day. And there was a whole bunch of logistical things on top of obviously the distance you had to travel to get down there. But the proximity sure helps. But, we're going to try to do the same things we've been doing from a, after school standpoint of getting a walk through, getting a pregame meal and getting on the bus and being ready to go.
Fair enough, Coach. Well, we want to wish you the best of luck. This will be our game of the week. We're looking forward to being out at Blessed Trinity High School over there in Roswell to call the game. And, Coach, man, I'm going to go ahead and put it out in the atmosphere again here. We look forward to talking to you next week when you go up to Gainesville and face the Red Elephants in round 2.
I'm in. You talked me into it.
Good luck, Coach. We'll see you on Friday night.
I appreciate it, guys. Y'all have a good night.
So a special thank you again to Coach Williams for joining us here on the North Georgia Sports Report podcast. And our final game that we're going to run down through here, Alpharetta and Sequoyah. This is a big one because it's the first home game for Cherokee County since 2020 as far as the playoffs are concerned.
That is a big one. Last playoff game played in the county was the COVID year, and that was a year that River Ridge won their only region championship.
They did, and they played Lee County in their final game,
right?
Which did not go the way they wanted to, but they had a couple of signature wins, including a win over Rome.
And an exciting win over Kennesaw Mountain. They almost didn't get as a number 1 seed. They were taken to the brink. They bounced back, put a hurting on Rome. That's the last time Rome lost to a Cherokee County team, I believe it was in 2020. And then, of course, you mentioned the Lee County game. But the Sequoyah Chiefs will be at Skip Pope Stadium, the first time they've been at Skip Pope in a playoff game since 2018. We talk about the great run they made to the quarterfinals. That was the last home game they played against Northside Warner Robins. You and I were both there, different places.
Yep.
But we were both there at that
same
ball
enjoyment
game.
level.
Yeah. It was cold and misty all
awful.
night. It was a miserable night for high school football, but nonetheless, Sequoyah coming in here, as you mentioned, Coop, we mentioned earlier in the show, with a big win. I say a big win because any win's a big win at this time of year over county rival Woodstock. Maybe a momentum sustainer coming into this week. They play Alpharetta. These two teams met one time previously back in that 2018 season. It was a second-round ball game at Skip Pope Stadium. Masterful game called by Coach Teter. As I say that, I believe Sequoyah was down to Alpharetta, I believe, going into halftime that game. They come back, have a great second half, and win it. They'll try to replicate that. But I tell you what, this is not an Alpharetta team that is to be slept on. They've got a young quarterback in DJ Bordeaux. I believe he's thrown already this season, has thrown for over 2,300 yards and 25 touchdowns. Just absolutely nuts.
Yeah, they are a very dynamic team. They are 5-5, as you mentioned. Their losses come to Jefferson, Cambridge, which is kind of odd, but then the rest makes sense. And Milton, Roswell, and Blessed Trinity, which is how they end up at the 3 seed, obviously the 2 region losses. They only have 1 road win this season. I haven't dove into the actual home and away splits for them, but just from a win-loss record, they only win 1 game on the road. So something to keep an eye on there. Sequoyah does lead the series all-time 1-0. You were just talking about it. Their first matchup was back in 2018 in the playoffs. I think for Sequoyah fans, they'd be willing to take a repeat of that even the score and everything else. I know I would. I'd be willing
absolutely.
to have the same thing. This is the first matchup between Coach Teter and Jason Curvin, not James, but Jason Curvin, as you mentioned, who is the new head coach over there at Alpharetta in the past couple years. And the winner of this game will play the winner of Douglas County and Habersham Central. Douglas County, one of the teams in 6A that is in that top 10 upper echelon of teams after a convincing win over Hughes, and I think they finished undefeated.
They did 10-0.
Yeah, so
Sire Hardaway, their quarterback.
Tough,
very special individual. Yeah.
Hope that Habersham Central can maybe nick them up a little bit before you have to get to that point. But either way, Sequoyah will come into this about a touchdown favorite, so hopefully they can hold on to that margin. But all in all, Art, you mentioned some about the quarterback there at Alpharetta. I think the question for Sequoyah in this one is, can they do the simple things right? Because I think that's what it comes down to when it comes to Sequoyah. Running the clock effectively, they want to shorten this game. They don't want to give the ball to that explosive Alpharetta offense too terribly much. I certainly agree with that idea. And they also want to limit the amount of time that their defense has to be out there, because as a corner, you can cover a really good receiver 10, 15, 20 times. When you're asking them to cover him 30, 40 times, that's when things start to break down. So the exhaustion can certainly come into it. So I think the Sequoyah offense is going to have to help out their defense, limit the amount of possessions, control the clock, don't turn the ball over, and that'll be the key for Sequoyah.
Coop, I think Sequoyah's going to have success and move on to the second round. It's going to rely heavily on their defense, something I want to talk to Coach Teter about, because it looks like to me it's strength on strength. Sequoyah's defense, their secondary, at least in their linebackers against these wide receivers and this offensive line of Alpharetta. Can they get pressure on the quarterback, Bordeaux? Look, I think if they can limit Alpharetta to 21, 24 points, I think that's a good number for Sequoyah. I don't know if Alpharetta I never thought I would say this, but can outscore Sequoyah. But recently, the Chiefs have been putting up points in bunches, and I think they can, like you mentioned, if they can put up enough points, I think Coach Buddy and his defense can find a way to limit Bordeaux to 24 points this week. If Sequoyah can get to 25, 26, I like their chances.
Yeah, you mentioned that they're putting up 230 or 23.6 points per game, 236 total on the year. So that's a pretty high number considering last year they only scored about 18 points per game. So they've certainly improved in that regard, and the defense has only allowed 14 more total points over the entire year. So the defense is holding serve, and the offense is better by a couple of possessions at this point. So it certainly helps across the board for the Chiefs. I think that it's something that where Sequoyah, if they can get through this game and hope that Habersham Central can cause some chaos, or even a matchup against Douglas County, I don't think is going to be too terribly ugly. So I think that for Sequoyah, this could be a team that we talk about for a while as being kind of that starter team. And I'm interested to see what happens. Again, at Skip Pope, if you're not going to be able to be there, join our friends at Chiefs TV on YouTube. But if you're out and about and you're just looking for an audio-only version, we will be able to provide you score updates. Again, Stationhead app, stationhead.com. We'll be happy to do that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to do that. Coop, just last three games, just going to go over point totals for Sequoyah, trending in the right direction, 31, 35, 49 in all three victories there. Again, a 2-3 matchup. One where if a 3 seed beats a 2 seed, nobody is as surprised. It's not that 1-4 matchup here. I think the two things that Sequoyah does well, they know how to play. They know how to defend the pass, and they can run the football when they have to. And again, they're not going to dazzle teams. They're not. It's not 1,200, 1,500, 1,800 rushing yards this season for them. But they've mixed in enough with Rajecki, with Mariah, with Hancock, where they're able to keep teams off balance. They've moved some players around a couple places, putting athletes in their best athletes in positions to make plays. And I think at this point in the season, that's what you want. And Coop, I think we have Coach Teter calling in here to talk a little bit more about that. And again, we've got some questions. We really want to kind of pick his brain on a couple things.
Coach, thank you for being back with us.
Thank you guys for having me again.
Absolutely, Coach. Always look forward to it, and glad to be able to talk about some playoff football with you, as you guys are the first team to host a playoff game in Cherokee County since 2020. How important is that for your team, in your opinion?
Oh, I think it's extremely important. Kind of a familiarity for our kids. We don't have to worry about getting on a bus and traveling. So I think it's huge for our kids, and it's really good for our community and the town of Hickory Flat.
Coach, last week you got a win to close out the regular season, and something that we've debated on the podcast, on air, and some of the games we do. Your playoff seeding was already determined prior to that game last week. Does that play a role in whether you play your starters or not, or how you make that decision? Can you kind of walk us through? Is that how that decision's made? Is it, hey, we're going to play our starters and then maybe we'll look to our backups, or is there a specific plan in place? How do you approach that when that playoff seeding's already determined?
I'll be honest with you. For us, we didn't change anything. We kept things status quo. Sometimes we worry in our coaches' meeting about that sending the wrong message to our kids. And so we were a little worried that if we, kind of pinpoint, hey, guys, we're going to play you all X amount of minutes and that's it, then maybe they don't take that last game as serious what we thought they should have. So we just kept everything as is. Amongst us as a staff, we knew if a game got to a certain point, we'd start taking people out. But as far as to the kids and how we practiced and how we did everything kind of stayed the same with us.
Coach, you guys learned a lot last year as you went to South Paulding and really gave them all they could handle for about 3 quarters. A lot of those players that did that are still on this team. What do you think your team learned from that game?
I think they learned a lot. I mean, really, to be honest with you, that's kind of the reason we kind of went to what we were running this year, was kind of some things that happened in that game. We had to learn to throw the ball better. We had to learn to be able to spread things out and get people out of the box. But I think, that experience for our kids is going to help a lot on Friday. They've kind of been through this routine. They've kind of understand everything this week. So I think it'll help them a lot. But I think as a team in whole, all of us grew a little bit from that game and helped us prepare and get ready for this year.
Coach, we've known you historically, at least your run as a head coach, your teams have been really great on the ground. But statistically speaking, it looks like you guys have become the air raid chiefs. What's been the key to success through the air this season, especially these last 3 games where, you've gone over 300 yards once and again, put up some big numbers in those other 2 games. What has been the key to success in turning that thing around this year?
I think it's just, a little bit different in the system. It's a little bit more pass happy than what we're used to. And then I think it's, just having the confidence in Colby to be able to handle what we're doing, what most people don't see. And because it's I guess for no other word, the RPO world, most of the things we're doing has a run tied to it. It's just he sees what the defense has given us, and we trust him to make that decision. And so far to this point, he's made great decisions with what we had. So I think him having a little bit more confidence in who he's throwing to helps. And I think just that year of being in the weight room, you can see a tremendous difference in the ball he throws. The deep ball is a lot better than it was a year ago. And we kind of talked to him a lot about that this week, really just in preparing for next year, what he's got to do. But I think a lot of it just stems from the confidence we have in Colby and him being able to do these things. Back when Collier Pace was here, we ran it a lot, but we also threw it enough to keep people honest, and that's because we had a lot of confidence in Collier. Colby's kind of getting to that same point right now where we feel we're comfortable with him, doing some things. We're comfortable with him making some checks if we need it. But a lot of that, I think, just stems around us having the confidence in him.
Coach, you guys are going to be playing Alpharetta this Friday. Again, that's a home game for you guys, and that's a big deal. But I want to ask, you've had a chance to look at Alpharetta a little bit at this point in the week, I'm sure. Can you talk a little bit about the matchup and how they match up against your team and what you're looking for on Friday night?
Yeah, we'll have our hands full. They're very athletic everywhere. Got really good receivers, really good running back. The quarterback's pretty special. He can throw it, can throw the deep ball really well. So defensively, we're going to have to be able to find a way to get a rush on him and keep him uncomfortable in that pocket, kind of get him out of there, make him have to move around a little bit, because if you just let him sit there, he'll pick you apart. And then offensively, they're very aggressive up front. They fly around to the ball, so we got to do some things that we've done in the past, but from the shotgun formation, we got to use some misdirection, got to use some play action. We've got to do some things to kind of get them uncomfortable on defense and make them have to see things that may not really be there, just by moving around and changing up some things. They're really good, really well coached. Like us, they've had a pretty tough schedule. If you go back and look at some of the people they've lost to, they've been really, really good teams. So I think they're a lot better than what their record shows. But we'll have our hands full, but we'll have to play really well and have to be mistake-free.
Coach, again, on the phone with Coach James Teter, the head coach of the Sequoyah Chiefs. His team will be hosting a playoff game, on the first-round playoff game. Coach, the last time you played Alpharetta, it was a fantastic game. I had a front-row seat. I was sitting in the far end zone with your now defensive coordinator, and he was giving me a lesson on how you were giving Alpharetta a lesson in that ball game, late in that game. As I turn on the tape, do you see the way they throw the ball? And their quarterback is special. He's young, and he's throwing for a lot of yards. They got a couple great receivers. Is it strength on strength, their offense versus your defense? Do you look at it that way, or is it, it's still going back to we have to apply pressure to them, or what do you look at their receivers versus your secondary?
We've told our kids and we've talked about it. I mean, if you're going athlete for athlete, they're probably more athletic than we are. Is it strength on strength? Yeah, I'd probably say so. And what Coach Buddy does with his defense probably helps us a bunch because he does send people from everywhere. And again, that's what we feel we got to do to kind of keep that kid uncomfortable back there. But in a lot of these type games, what it comes down to is what we can do offensively and keep them off the field. So, I think really what it comes down to is, Britt doing the best he can to kind of hold them, even if we have to bend a little bit, just don't break. And then how many times we can keep the ball. And even though we're shotgun, most people have seen it this year, even though we're shotgun, we're still eating the clock. And if we can have some long, sustained drives to keep them off the field, sometimes that helps. And that helps get a spread team to panic a little bit because they're losing time. So that's kind of been what we're planning on doing, is see if we can have those long, sustained drives to help him out.
Well, Coach, we certainly wish you the best of luck on Friday, again, as you guys take on Alpharetta, that game at Skip Pope. We will certainly be keeping a close eye on it, and we're hoping that we get a chance to talk to you next week on the podcast.
I appreciate everything, guys. Thanks for all you do.
So, again, thank you to Coach Teter for being with us. If we do have any teams that advance next week, we will continue this.
I'm sorry, Coop. When we have teams that advance next week.
Oh,
come on.
Okay.
Yeah, when
all
we
right.
have teams that advance next week.
You see, you're somebody that doesn't believe in stuff getting jinxed.
I don't.
I do.
I don't.
I can jinx stuff like you wouldn't believe.
Although, I will say, and this is a complete sidebar, watching a football game with my wife, who does not watch a whole lot of football, but I think I don't know which game it was, but an announcer said such and such hasn't missed. It might have been Will Reichert.
Yeah, it was. It was. I know exactly what happened. He's not missed a field goal within 50 yards. He's 26 of 26.
I just looked at my wife and my oldest, and I said, he's going to miss this. It's the good old announcer jinx, and sure enough.
You've been with me in the booth enough to know that I have it.
Yes.
I can jinx a kid out of making a field goal like you wouldn't believe.
So I'm going to go ahead and change. It's not a jinx. I'm just putting it in the atmosphere. We will have at least one team advance next week.
Good energy then.
I like it.
All right.
I like it.
Well, we have a little bit of a competition going on. We should fill the people in.
Yeah.
We do a staff pick'em where we like to pick against the metaphorical spread that's put out there by the predictors. And
some of us pick, and then some of us copy picks.
Well, that's true. Dave Garner is who you're talking about before anybody throws any accusations around. Long story short, Art and I finished the season tied.
Hey, why is that a thing? Why is that a thing for you, Coop? I mean,
did I finish tied?
Yeah, did you finish tied with me?
Did we finish tied last year?
No, you beat me last year.
Well, then why? What do you mean? Why is it a thing?
I mean, is it great on your ego that I tied you this year?
No, it really hurts my feelings. Actually, it takes me a lot longer to get my picks done than it does you, because I just send them out and you just that's probably.
And
it.
I must say, I choked away a 2-game lead going into
the
final week.
You did. Luckily, you slacked up a little bit. But to separate that decision, because what we have on the line is absolutely nothing. It's all about pride, and anybody that knows us knows we're two prideful gentlemen, and we certainly won't back away from a challenge.
That's a fact.
So here we are. We're filling out brackets March Madness style, and we're going to run through them with you. We got 6A and 7A put together here.
Yeah.
And which one you want to start with?
Let's go 7A. The big dogs.
Valdosta Archer.
I like Archer.
I got Valdosta in that one.
That's wrong. That's where I'm gonna. That's where I'm gonna win it all.
Okay. Harrison Carrollton.
Carrollton.
I got Carrollton too. North Gwinnett, West Forsyth.
The Bulldogs, North Gwinnett.
Yeah, I got North Gwinnett too. Mountain View and Walton.
Walton Raiders, baby.
Yep, you got it. Camden County and Newton.
The Newton Rams.
Yeah, give me the Rams. Campbell and McEachern.
I like McEachern and what Coach Reed's doing over there, man.
I like McEachern. Campbell's going to keep it real close. McEachern's going to kick a field goal, win it late. Lambert, Peachtree Ridge.
Give me the fighting Coach Derek Corley. He's the defensive line coach over there. Short story, Coach Corley played high school football with my brother.
Okay.
Down in Jacksonville, Florida. I like Peachtree Ridge. I'm all in.
Give me Lambert in that one. I think that's a 3 versus 2. Lambert.
Wrong again.
Lambert, very impressive this year in some regards. And I think that Region 6 was pretty tough. Let's move on. Osborne, Mill Creek. I got Mill Creek.
Yeah, I like Mill Creek, defending state champs.
Yeah, going to be hard not to pick Mill Creek through this one. Wheeler and Buford, interesting first round. Wheeler is probably one of the best third seeds in there, one of the most interesting third seeds. Tough break drawing Buford. I think everybody knows what Buford is, even despite the loss to Mill Creek. Give me the Wolves.
Yeah, Buford looking to be the only team to win a state title in every classification in the state of Georgia. This is the last year they'll be able to do that, barring reclass
further
again.
exam.
So anyway, I like Buford.
Denmark and Norcross.
Yeah, Norcross.
I'm taking Denmark in this one. I'm pulling the upset here. Again,
All right.
Region 6. I think it's a tough region. Norcross, very good team.
Yeah, A.J. Watkins not going to let that happen.
You may be right. East Coweta and North Paulding.
This is a tough one for me. I think North Paulding is a team I was high on coming in. They falter a little bit. I was a little bit surprised at some of those losses over there by Paulding. I like East Coweta.
I'm a strength of resume guy. Give me North Paulding and the Wolfpack.
Okay.
Richmond Hill and Grayson.
Grayson.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty evident. Collins Hill and North Cobb. This is a game that's going to be interesting, I think.
I think North Cobb, if they continue to play like they have been, no sweat. I think they take Collins Hill to the woodshed.
Yeah, I do have North Cobb coming out on top in that one. Duluth and Milton.
Milton.
Yeah, Milton, big time. Marietta and Westlake.
I like Westlake. I know they haven't been as dominant. It's a little bit different team, but I think Marietta struggled a little bit. And I'm not quite sure the strength outside of Region 3, Region Champ McEachern. I'm not quite sure the strength of that region over there, but I like Westlake.
I'm taking Marietta in this one. Westlake got smoked by Carrollton, and Marietta, in their out-of-region schedule, played, I think they have like 4 top 10 7A teams they've played, so they're going to be battle-tested. Obviously not the Marietta of old coming into this one, but I do like Marietta a little bit over them. And then the final for the first round, Parkview and Colquitt County. Who you got?
Yeah, Colquitt.
Yeah, Colquitt. And then to round this out, that way we don't pick through all the same
right.
ones.
Yeah, nobody wants to hear us.
Yeah, you got your final 4?
Yeah, I like Carrollton out of the upper left-hand or northwest bracket.
Okay.
Yeah, whatever. But coming out of that top left bracket, Carrollton, Mill Creek in the semifinals. I've got Buford and Colquitt in the semifinals on the other side of the bracket. And I've got, maybe shocking to some folks, Mill Creek and Colquitt in the state tournament, and I'm going South Georgia. I know it's going to bite me. That's a kiss of death for the pack. All right. Sorry, Colquitt County. I'm picking you as a state champ, so.
Well, you and I have the same Final 4 of Carrollton, Mill Creek, Buford, and Colquitt. The difference I have is it'll be Carrollton and Colquitt in the state championship game, and I like the Carrollton Trojans thanks to the leadership of Coach Joey King, who was the fastest coach in Georgia high school football history to reach 100 wins.
All right. He's been there and done that.
Certainly has. And then we'll move on to 6A, if you are ready.
Yeah, man.
All right, let's start top left, Dunwoody versus Lee County.
Yeah, Lee County.
Yeah, that playoff experience is a big thing there, and that's
and kudos for Dunwoody, who's kind of struggled as in recent years, making it interesting over there in Region 6, 5, Region 4.
Yeah, it's on your sheet. There. You can actually look.
Yeah, I'm eyes are going bad over here. But anyway, hats off to the Wildcats. But going down to Lee County.
Yeah, not a good place to go. Lovejoy and Effingham County.
I tell you what, Region 2 is probably, in my opinion, one of the most curious regions.
Yeah.
But I still think Effingham has enough in the tank. Lovejoy's got to make that long trip down there. I like Effingham.
I agree. Alpharetta and Sequoyah.
I'm going with the Chiefs.
Give me the Chiefs, too. Habersham Central and Douglas County.
Douglas County.
Yeah, that's not going to be close. Houston and North Atlanta.
Yeah, give me Hoko, man. I like Houston County. They got a young quarterback who's on his way to play for Coach Prime. They put out a lot of points. Houston also upset, I believe it was Marist last year in the first round.
Yeah, it was something like that.
As a 4 seed, I think that's a battle-tested team. I like North Atlanta's team speed, but and I know they're at home. I like Houston.
As the coach Larry Prather says, speed kills, keep your kids off of it. I will not be keeping it off of my bracket. I'm taking North Atlanta.
All right. That's where we digress, huh?
All right. Evans and Woodward Academy.
Give me the War Eagles of Woodward Academy.
Yeah, they're a really good team right now. Creekview and Blessed Trinity.
This game's going down to the wire, Coop.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a heartbreaker for one of these teams. But I like the Titans on a field goal.
Yeah, give me the Titans. South Paulding and Gainesville.
Go the old nickname for Gainesville, the Red Leghorns, is what it was. Give me the Red Leghorns all the way.
Yeah, Niblett's going to have them ready to play. They lost in the state title last year.
Yeah.
They're going to be real upset about that.
Absolutely.
I think they're going to be a tough team. East Paulding and Lanier.
I'm going with Lanier.
I go with Lanier, too, in this one. Roswell River Ridge.
Give me Roswell, man.
Yeah, I don't like it, but I am going to take Roswell. Brunswick and Mundy's Mill.
And I tell you what, again, this is a Brunswick team that won the region title last year. They were upset by Glen Academy earlier in the season. They're not as good as they have been. I just don't know how strong Region 3 is. I like the Pirates of Brunswick.
I agree with you on that. I actually pull the upset with you on that one. A tough first-round matchup. You talk about a team you didn't want to face in the first round. That's Northside Warner Robins. Marist will host them. Who you got?
I agree, tough one, but I like Marist. They've been consistent this season as they typically are. Played Gainesville tough.
Yep.
In the opening round of the
win over Blessed Trinity.
Yep. So I like the Marist War Eagles.
Yep, I agree with you on that one, Marist, for sure. North Forsyth and Langston Hughes.
Give me Hughes. Defending state champ.
I just, that loss to Douglas, I think, knocked him so far out of the view of the state, and I don't really know why. It wasn't a bad loss, and I think Langston Hughes might be a team that makes a run that people aren't expecting. I think people just kind of see him as the second seed and move on. But Sprayberry and Rome. Yeah, that one wasn't hard. Jonesboro and Glen Academy.
Give me Glen Academy.
I'm taking Glen.
Coach Hidalgo down there.
Yeah.
Never a dull moment with him on social media.
One of the best Twitter follows you will have is Coach Rocky Hidalgo. He's an interesting character, and he doesn't mind telling you about it.
Yeah, he is.
St. Pius X and Thomas County Central.
Give me the Yellow Jackets of Thomas County Central down there in southwest Georgia.
Yeah, you got it. All right, moving on to the Final Four. Who you got?
All right, coming out of that top left bracket, I've got Lee County. I've got them beating Douglas County in a very interesting game over there in the quarterfinals. I've also got Gainesville. I like the Red Elephants. I like the way they come out of that bracket. Marist, I'm going with Coach Chadwick and his triple option ground game. They can also throw the ball a little bit. And then Thomas County Central, who's been putting up tons and tons of yardage on offense. Give me Gainesville and TCC, little North Georgia, South Georgia in the state title game. And Gainesville brings the title home in my poll. So if Gainesville loses, Dave Garner, I know that Coach Niblett's your boy over there, but I'm giving them the kiss of death.
I am shockingly similar to you. I got Lee County and Gainesville just like you do. Where we differ is Marist and Roswell. I think Roswell's going to win against Marist.
Okay.
Move to the Final Four. They'll face Thomas County Central. Won't matter. The final's the same, I think, as you have, Gainesville and Thomas County Central. I also like the Red Elephants as a winner. I think that motivation from losing last year in that state title is enough to get them motivated where they will win that. And also the addition of guys like Gavin Hall.
Yeah.
A very fortunate transfer.
Well, I tell you what, timing is everything. Coop, I know we're not running through every single bracket here, but interesting 4-1 matchups. Parkview going down to Colquitt County. Parkview's lost a couple of their starting running backs this season. It's been kind of very unfortunate for them, but I am interested to see that score. I think that's a game that you might take a look at and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe that these guys, dropped a game. Stevenson and Northwest Whitfield in Class 4A. Stevenson, the number 1 seed, kind of quietly over there in Region 6. I think Northwest is a team that can put some points on the board. Interesting matchup. That's a 1-4 game that I think might be I'd put on upset alert are the Stevenson Jaguars. Also, going down to Class 3A, I know I'm going to probably get laughed out of the room here, but Hebron Christian put a whipping on Stevens County. They end up being a number 4 seed. They will come to Atlanta to play Cedar Grove or Ellenwood or wherever that game's going to be played. I like Cedar Grove, but I'm going to put them on upset alert. Hebron Christian can be a dangerous team. You mentioned Gavin Hall was a quarterback there last year, no longer there. But that's a game that I'm scratching my head and saying this could be very interesting. And also, all of the Region 5 Region 8 matchups. Carver, Atlanta, Stevens County. Carver, Atlanta, the 4 seed, but Stevens County, again, coming off that loss last week. I'm curious to see how these guys match up. Douglas, Atlanta, and Oconee County, and then Sandy Creek in Monroe area. Those are all 4 of those matchups to me are probably the best matchups in Class 3A. And there was one more. This is not a 4-3 matchup, but a matchup in Class 2A that I think could be worthy of maybe a state title matchup. We get in the first round the Appling County Pirates down in Baxley, Georgia, against the Northeast Macon Raiders. Northeast Macon, lots of heartbreaker. They have their starting running back missed a game. They lost in the regular season, a loss that cost them the number 1 seed. They'll host Appling County, but Appling County Pirates, a team that's been ranked in the top 10. Both these teams ranked in the top 10. It's going to be a first-round game. Just a very curious 2-3 matchup there. And again, Appling County, at least in my 2A bracket, is a team I have in the Final Four. So I know that was a mouthful, but those are some of the upsets here that I'm looking for in the state tournament.
Well, that's definitely some bulletin board material for some folks out there, and they'll be able to listen back to this and digress.
Call me to the carpet.
Pretty much. That's typically how this goes with us.
Yeah, if I'm wrong, it won't be the first time.
Well, what can we say? But either way, we know this. It's the best time of year when it comes to this type of thing.
It is. Coop, I am excited. I'm glad to be out. We'll be out at Blessed Trinity. Thank you again for the GHSA for allowing that to happen. Thank you for the fine folks at Blessed Trinity. Thank you for Tina Kugel Photography for allowing us to for being a sponsor this week for the playoff game. We really appreciate that. And of course, as always, thank you to our fans, the players, the coaches, and the fans who listen in to our podcast week in and week out. I strongly believe we'll be back here next week recording again, Coop.
I certainly hope so. Even if we're not here recording football, we'll be back at some point recording basketball. So,
Absolutely.
Again, the North Georgia Sports Network lives on, folks. This is not something that ends at the end of football season. We'll be here all year round, so make sure you join us for that. Again, we'll be at Blessed Trinity, Stationhead app, stationhead.com. We'll be going live right around 7 o'clock as we'll be bringing you the Creekview Grizzlies as they head over to Blessed Trinity and face the Titans in round 1 of the GHSA playoffs. If you're a fan of Cherokee County football, join us Friday night. We'll be able to keep score updates on the other 2 games as well. We're looking forward to it, and we appreciate you joining us. For Will Cooper and Art Mosley, have a good night, everybody. We'll see you next week.